My name is Margaret Lewis, and I am 68 years old. For 43 years, I believed my husband and I were building a life together. Apparently, I was the only one who believed that. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when my world collapsed. I was in the kitchen of our suburban home, preparing dinner like I had done thousands of times before. Roast chicken in the oven, mashed potatoes on the stove, and the smell of rosemary filling the house. Daniel usually came home around 6, but that day he came home early. At first, I thought he had forgotten something, maybe his briefcase or his phone. But when the door opened, I heard another pair of footsteps behind him. Light footsteps, high heels. I walked into the hallway and froze. Standing next to my husband was a woman who couldn't have been more than 30 years old. She had long blonde hair, bright lipstick, and a tight red dress that looked like it belonged in a nightclub rather than my living room. Daniel cleared his throat. "Margaret," he said awkwardly, "this is Ashley." Ashley smiled politely, like someone meeting a distant relative at a family reunion. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to explain why a young woman was standing in my home. But instead of embarrassment or guilt, Daniel looked relieved. "I think it's time we talk," he said. We sat at the dining table, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas dinners for decades. But that afternoon, it felt like a stranger's house. Daniel didn't waste time. "I've fallen in love with Ashley," he said calmly. Just like that. 43 years of marriage reduced to one sentence. I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. "What?" I whispered. "We've been seeing each other for about a year," he continued. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I can't keep living a lie." A year. An entire year while I cooked his meals, washed his clothes, and listened to him talk about late meetings at the office. Ashley shifted slightly in her chair, but didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, she looked impatient. "I think it's best if we move on with our lives," Daniel continued. "Ashley and I are starting fresh." My hands trembled slightly, but strangely, I didn't cry. I was too shocked for tears. "And what exactly does that mean?" I asked. "It means I'm leaving," he said. "Ashley and I already found a condo downtown." The words echoed in my mind. He had planned everything, behind my back. "Daniel," I said slowly, "we've been married for 4 decades. "Yes," he said, "but people change." Ashley finally spoke. "We didn't want to do this in a messy way," she said sweetly. Her voice had that fake sympathy people use when they don't actually care. Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I already spoke to a lawyer," he said. "Divorce papers. If we handle this calmly, we can avoid unnecessary drama." He slid the folder across the table toward me. I looked down at the papers, my marriage summarized in legal language. "Of course," he added quickly, "you'll keep the house." How generous. After all, the house had been in my family for 3 generations. "I'll take the business," he continued. "That's only fair since I built it." I finally looked up at him. The business. Lewis Custom Furniture. The company we had started together when we were in our 20s. Back then, we had nothing but a small garage workshop and a borrowed table saw. Daniel built the furniture. I handled everything else. Accounting, orders, customer calls, payroll, taxes. For 40 years, I ran the financial side of that company. But apparently, in Daniel's mind, it was his alone. Ashley leaned forward slightly. "Daniel has worked so hard for that company," she said softly. I almost laughed, but instead I simply nodded. "If that's what you want," I said calmly. Daniel seemed surprised by my reaction. "You're taking this well," he said. I shrugged. "What's the point of fighting?" Ashley smiled. Daniel looked relieved. "Good," he said. "This will make things easier for everyone." He stood up and grabbed his briefcase. "I'll come by next week for the rest of my things." And just like that, they left. No tears, no shouting, just the sound of the front door closing. I stood in the quiet house for several minutes. Then I walked back into the kitchen and turned off the oven. The chicken had burned, but I didn't care. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, and slowly a small smile appeared on my face. Because Daniel had made one very big mistake, one he didn't even realize. You see, 32 years ago, when the business had started growing, our accountant suggested we incorporate the company. Daniel hated paperwork, so I handled it. I filled out every form, every registration, every tax document. And when it came time to list the legal owner of the company, Daniel told me to just put your name on it for now. He said he trusted me, and we never bothered to change it for 32 years. The business wasn't Daniel's, legally speaking. It was mine. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I put on a navy blue suit I hadn't worn in years. Then I drove to the office. Lewis Custom Furniture had grown a lot since the garage days. We now had a large workshop, a showroom, and more than 40 employees. When I walked in, the receptionist looked surprised. "Mrs. Lewis, good morning." "Good morning, Janet," I said. Daniel usually handled the workshop, but everyone knew I managed the financial side, so my presence wasn't unusual. I walked straight to my office and closed the door. Then I called our corporate lawyer. "Good morning, Mr. Harris," I said. "Well, hello, Margaret. What can I do for you?" "I think it's time we reviewed the ownership structure of Lewis Custom Furniture." There was a brief pause. "Of course," he said, "but as far as I remember, you are the sole registered owner." "Exactly." Another pause. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Oh no," I said calmly. "Everything is about to be very right." Later that afternoon, Daniel walked into the office with Ashley beside him. Apparently, he couldn't wait a whole week. Employees greeted him normally, but I noticed a few curious glances when Ashley walked through the showroom like she owned the place. Daniel opened the door to my office without knocking. "Margaret," he said, "we need to talk about the transition." Ashley stood behind him, looking around my office like she was inspecting a hotel room. "I agree," I said. Daniel sat down confidently. "I'll take over the accounts and financial access starting next week. You won't have to worry about the business anymore." Ashley smiled proudly. I folded my hands on the desk. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's something you should know first." Daniel frowned. "What?" I opened a folder and slid a document across the desk. According to the State Business Registry, Lewis Custom Furniture has exactly one legal owner. Daniel glanced at the paper. Then his expression changed. Confusion, then disbelief, then anger. "This is wrong," he said. "It's not," I replied. Ashley leaned forward. "What does it say?" Daniel's voice dropped. "It says Margaret Lewis." Ashley blinked. "What?" I smiled politely. You see, when we incorporated the company 32 years ago, Daniel asked me to handle the paperwork. Daniel stood up. "This is ridiculous. I built that company." "Yes," I said gently, "and I ran it." Ashley crossed her arms. "This has to be a mistake." "It isn't." Daniel faced furious. "You did this behind my back." "No," I said calmly. "You just never bothered to check." The room fell silent. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "You need to transfer ownership to me." I shook my head. "No." Ashley scoffed. "You can't just steal his business." "I'm not stealing anything. I'm keeping what legally belongs to me." Daniel's face turned red. "You're being vindictive." I stood up slowly. "No, Daniel. You ended our marriage yesterday. You don't get to take my company, too." Ashley grabbed Daniel's arm. "Let's go." But before they left, I added one more thing. "Oh, Daniel." He turned. "You're welcome to keep your job at the workshop." Ashley's jaw dropped. "But from now on, you'll report to me." For the first time in 43 years, I felt completely free. Because sometimes life has a funny way of balancing the scales. My husband had left me for a younger woman, but he forgot one small detail. The business he thought he was taking with him was never his to begin with.